some independent truckers who use this route regularly. They're waiting at the county line. Walter's doing. Elaine explains with a smile. Said he made some calls. Sure enough, as Maggie approaches the county line, she finds 4 semi-trucks parked to the wide. Turnout Walter Bennett stands beside his rig, along with 3 other drivers Maggie doesn't recognize. They wave. As she pulls up, thought you might appreciate some company rolling into town. Walter says when Maggie steps down to greet them, safety, and Numbers agrees, a tall woman with gray streak braids who introduces herself as Darlene. Plus, we all have business in Riverdale deliveries that can't wait because some motorcycle gang decides they own the road. The other drivers, Miguel and Howard, nod in agreement. All of stories about Warlords' intimidation, demands for payment, or mysterious mechanical issues. After refusing, we're not looking for trouble, Howard clarifies, adjusting his worn trucker cap. Just doing our jobs without paying tribute to wannabe highway robbers. 5 trucks rolling in together sends a message. Walter adds, shows we're not intimidated. Maggie feels a surge of camaraderie with these fellow truckers. I appreciate this more than you know. They form a convoy Maggie's truck in the middle and proceed toward Riverdale, crossing into town limits. Maggie notices an immediate police presence, a county sheriff's cruiser parked conspicuously at the Welcome to Riverdale sign. The deputy inside watches their convoy pass, speaking into his radio. That'll be reporting to Caldwell. Walter says over the CB radio, expect a reception committee in town. Riverdale looks different in daylight, a small mountain town that might be picturesque under different circumstances. Main Street features brick buildings dating from the early 20th century, a town square with a gazebo and small businesses lining both sides. But there's a tension in the air visible in the weary glances from pedestrians as the truckers' convoy rumbles through outside the Riverdale in a 2-story brick building with white trim. 2 men in Warlords vests lounge beside their motorcycles. They straighten as the convoy approaches, one speaking into a cell phone. Our audience awaits. Maggie comments dry over the CB wheel. Escort you right to the door, Walter responds. Then we'll split up for our deliveries. Meet at Carlos's garage at 4. Roger that. The convoy stops directly in front of them, blocking the Warlords' bikes from immediate access. Walter, Darlene, Miguel, and Howard emerge from their truck simultaneously, creating a buffer zone. As Maggie retrieves her duffel bag from her cab, the Warlords members, neither of whom Maggie recognizes from her previous encounter, maintain their distance, but watch with obvious hostility. Thanks to the escort, Maggie tells her fellow truckers, see you at 4. Inside the small lobby, Tony Williams waits in a corner armchair, typing on a laptop. She looks up as Maggie enters, rising to greet her. Perfect timing. I was just finishing my notes from this morning's record search. She glances toward the window. I see you brought friends. Strength in numbers. Maggie says, signing the register, that the desk clerk pushes toward her. Find anything interesting at the county office? More than it. Let's talk in my room. Once settled in Tony's second floor room, the journalist opens her laptop to share her findings. The Warlords' financial web is extensive, but not particularly sophisticated. Drake Patterson has been purchasing properties through a shell company called Mountain Holdings, LLC. County records show he's acquired the truck stop, the Wolf Den Bar storage facility on the edge of town, and 3 resident presidential rental properties, all within the last 18 months. That's a lot of real estate for a motorcycle club. President Maggie observes exactly the purchase prices are suspiciously low, especially for commercial properties. And here's where it gets interesting. The previous owners of these properties all reported vandalism or threats shortly before selling. For sales, Maggie concludes classic intimidation tactic. There's more. Sheriff Caldwell's department budget shows unusual patterns. Equipment purchases with no delivered items, consulting fees to vague entities, overtime pay for deputies that doesn't match patrol records. Classic signs of funds being siphoned. Can you prove it? Tony shakes her head. Not yet. I need internal documents for that, but I've submitted public records requests that might help, and I'm meeting a confidential source this afternoon, a former deputy who left the department 6 months ago. Good work, Maggie says, genuinely impressed. What by the town meeting tonight, open to the public, Mayor Wilson seems to be genuinely trying to address the situation, though he's walking a political tight. Our PP, the Warlords, have supporters, especially among businesses benefiting from their protection rack, and enemies. Maggie counters, we need to ensure those voices are heard. To a knock at the door interrupts their conversation. Tony approaches, cautiously checking to the peephole before opening it. A young woman in a waitress uniform stands in the hallway, nervously glancing in both directions. Are you the reporter from Denver? I am Tony, confirms. My name's Rachel. I work at the Wolf Den, the bar. The Warlords' own Emma from the River Cafe said I should talk to you. She hesitates. Can I come in? I don't want to be seen. Once inside, Rachel explains that she's witnessed conversations between Drake Patterson and Sheriff Caldwell about business arrangements, and keeping things quiet more damning. She's seen envelopes of cash change hands. Last week, Drake was furious because some trucking company filed a complaint with the state police. He told Sheriff Caldwell to take care of it. For 23 years, Maggie Donovan has navigated America's highways with the same precision. She once drove military transports in war zones. But when she refuses to pay protection money to the warlord, a motorcycle club terrorizing the small town of Riverdale, what begins as a routine delivery quickly turns into a dangerous standoff on a remote mountain road, stranded with sabotaged tires and surrounded by hostile bikes. Maggie makes one phone call, not to 911, but to a number she's kept for decades, connecting to her military past and a promise made long ago. What the warlords don't realize is they've picked the wrong woman to bully, and by the time this night and their reign of terror over Riverdale will face its most formidable challenge yet. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, Red, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn sun glints off the chrome of Maggie Donovan's perturbable as it rolls down the interstate, an 18-wheeler moving with practiced precision. Inside the cabin, Maggie adjusts her baseball cap and checks her side mirrors. At 52, her face shows the weathering of someone who spent most of her life on the open road. Her graying hair is pulled back in a neat ponytail, and her eyes carry the alert vigilance of someone who's seen more than highways in her lifetime. The dashboard holds two photographs, one a young woman with Maggie's smile, the other showing a younger Maggie in army fatigue, standing beside a military transport truck in desert terrain. 23 years of trucking, 8 years before that in the army. The miles and memories pile up like the markers on the highway. Maggie glances at her GPS. 400 down, 300 to go. She mutters, rubbing the back of her neck. Wellington by nightfall. If traffic holds a delivery of medical supplies, is time-sensitive. Hospitals don't wait, and neither does Maggie. The welcome to Riverdale sign appears ahead. Population 327 according to faded numbers that probably haven't been updated in a decade. A small town nestled in a valley surrounded by pine forest, the kind of place most truckers pass through. Without a second thought today, Maggie decides to stop. 12 hours of continuous driving demands a hot meal and real coffee, not the lukewarm brew from her thermos. She eases the massive truck into Riverdale truck stop on the town's outskirts. The place has seen better days. Paint peeling at the corner's neon Dino sign, missing the E, but a row of well-kept trucks suggests it's still a popular one-way point. Maggie parks with the precision of someone who's done it thousands of times, sets the brake, and climbs down from the cab. She stretches, feeling the stiffness in her lower back, then locks the truck and heads inside the diner portion of the truck stop. Has a comfortable, worn-in feel of a place that served road warriors for decades. Photos of trucks and local landscapes lined with paneled walls and the smell of coffee and grilled onions fills the air. Behind the counter, an older waitress with dyed red hair and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck looks up. Afternoon, the waitress says with practiced smile as Maggie slides into a booth. Haven't seen you through here before. First time. Maggie confirms, just passing through to Wellington. I'm Betty. The waitress says, pouring coffee without asking. Creams on the table. Cook makes the best meatloaf this side of the Mississippi. If you're hungry, been driving since dawn. Maggie says, warming her hands around the mug. Meatloaf sounds perfect. Betty nods and heads toward the kitchen, leaving Maggie to survey the other patrons. A few scattered truckers hunched over plates, an elderly couple in the corner booth, a local man reading a newspaper at the counter. Normal small town scene until the door swings open. 5 men in leather motorcycle vests enter. Their presence immediately changing the atmosphere. The elderly couple falls silent, and one of the truckers suddenly finds his plate fascinating. The leader, tall, with a meticulously groomed beard and calculating eyes, scans the room before settling his gaze on Maggie. For a beat too long. Afternoon, a boy's Betty says, her smile tightening. Slightly regular tables open. The leader nods, guiding his group to a corner booth with clear sight lines to both the entrance and Maggie. Their vests bear a patch of snarling wolf's head with the words Warlords mech arcing above it. Betty delivers Maggie's meatloaf. Her movements efficient, but her eyes wary. Anything else you need, hun? This looks great, thanks. Maggie says, picking up her fork. A lifetime of observation has taught her when to attract attention, and when not to. This moment calls to the an elderly truck driver weathered face, white beard wearing a faded Route 66 cap, catches her eye from 2 booths away. He gives a subtle nod of professional recognition. Maggie returns it with a small smile understanding. The silent communication of the road, we see each other as. Maggie finishes her meal. She feels a presence at her table. The leader of the bikers stands too close, invading her space. Deliberately, his 4 companions remain seated, but watch attentively. That big Peterbilt outside yours, he asks, examining her truck keys on the table. Maggie takes a deliberate sip of coffee before answering. It is awful big rig for such a little lady, he says with a smirk that doesn't reach his eyes, gets the job done. Maggie responds evenly. He extends his hand. Drake Patterson, I run to the Warlords. MC, we manage most of the transport security in this county. Maggie doesn't take the offered hand. Didn't know highways needed motorcycle security. These days, a flash of annoyance crosses Drake's face, quickly masked by a cold smile. Independent drivers sometimes run into trouble around these parts. Mechanical issues, route problems, unexpected delays. The threat is thinly veiled. Maggie has encountered men like Drake before, in truck stops and bars, in war zones. Different uniform, same attitude. I appreciate a concern, she says, sliding out of the booth and standing at 5 feet 7 inches. She still has to look up at Drake, but her posture communicates she won't be intimidated. But I've handled my share of road troubles for 23 years now. Drake steps closer. A modest monthly contribution to our club ensures those troubles stay away. Considering it insurance, $200 keeps your rig safe through our territory. Maggie puts cash on the table for her meal, adding a generous tip. My insurance is with Progressive, but thanks for the offer, this isn't an offer. Drake says, his voice lowering. It's how things work here. Ask anyone. Betty watches anxiously from behind the counter. The elderly trucker has stopped eating and sits perfectly still. The diner has fallen silent. Then I'm changing how things work, Maggie says, meeting Drake's gaze directly. Now, excuse me, I've got a schedule to keep for a moment. They had an impasse. Drake finally steps aside with exaggerated courtesy, but his eyes have gone cold. Safe travels and roads around here can get real lonely. Maggie exits the diner, feeling their eyes on her back. She walks to her truck. With practice, calm, her senses heightened. She makes a mental note of the bikers' motorcycles, 5 Harley-Davidson parked in a neat row, customized with the same wolf insignia that adorns their vests. Inside her cab, she locks the doors and takes a deep breath. She glances at the photo of a young woman and touches it briefly. Not getting dragged into anything today. Julie, she murmurs. Her daughter doesn't need more worry. Nursing school is stressful enough without her mother getting into trouble on the road. As Maggie pulls out a truck stop, she notices Drake and one of his men watching her from the diner entrance. In her side mirror, she sees 2 motorcycles starting up. Coincidence? Maybe. But Maggie doesn't believe in coincidences. Not after what she's seen back on the highway. Maggie's truck rumbles steadily toward Wellington. The countryside grows more rugged as the road begins to climb into the mountains. Pine forests press close to the asphalt, and the late afternoon sun casts long shadows across the road. In her mirrors, Maggie spots 2 motorcycles gaining on her. They're still distant, but the coincidence puts her on alert. She checks her fuel gauge, 34, full enough to drive straight through without stopping again if needed. She reaches for her CB radio breaker one, and this is Steel Magnolia. Anybody got ears on this channel over static? Then a voice crackles. To go ahead, Steel Magnolia. This is L Hall Larry, about 20 miles ahead of you, just checking road conditions up ahead. Larry, any issues I should know about? Clear sailing from here to Wellington. You hauling through the night. That affirmative, got a tight delivery window. Well, watch yourself, this stretch gets mighty. Dark County cut back on road maintenance few years back. When the mill closed over, appreciate the heads up. Steel Magnolia out. Maggie replaces a mic and checks her mirrors again. The motorcycles are closer now, definitely following her. She recognizes the riders from the diner. Her truck round a bend, and Maggie sees a roadside rest area ahead with a couple of other trucks parked. She signals and pulls in, positioning her truck for a quick exit. If needed, the motorcycles slow as they pass the rest area in trance, then continue down the highway. Maggie watches them disappear around the next bend. She steps down from her cab, scanning the area. 2 other truckers are sitting at a picnic table, having coffee from thermoses, when a middle-aged black man with a salt and pepper beard nods in greeting. Trouble on your tail? He asks. Just being careful, you local. Maggie responds, her voice neutral, but her posture cautious. Pass through every month. Walter Bennett. He extends his hand. Maggie Donovan. She replies, shaking it. You ran into the Warlords, didn't you? Walter asks. And Maggie's expression confirms that they fancy themselves. The unofficial lore around these parts started as a veterans motorcycle club years back, but the new leadership's taken them in a different direction. They mention something about transport security. Maggie says Walter's companion An older driver with white hair and a weathered face snorts derisively. That's what they call extortion. These days, they shake down independent drivers' offer protection from problems. They call themselves local. Sheriff's son is one of them Walter ads. Makes it complicated. They got their hands in most businesses around here, folks. Our scared Maggie frown. Sounds like you're suggesting I should have paid up no Walter. Says firmly, just saying be careful they don't like being refused, especially by a woman. Maggie finishes. Anyone the older driver interjects. But yet they're old school in all the worst ways. Name's Hank. By the way, Walter checks his watch. Listen, I'm heading up to Wellington to convoy. If you want safety and numbers, I appreciate, Maggie says with a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes, but I've been handling myself on the road a long time, been dealing with road bullies. Since before these guys had their first motorcycles, fair enough, Walter nods respectfully, but take my number just in case our reception is spotty in the mountains, but I'll be on channel 17. If you need anything, Maggie accepts the offered business card, tucking it into her jacket pocket. Thanks, I should get. Moving back on the road, Maggie keeps a vigilant eye on her surroundings for the next hour. She sees no sign of the motorcycles, and she begins to think they've lost interest. The terrain becomes more rugged as the highway climbs into higher elevations. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows across the road, and traffic thins to almost nothing. Rounding a sharp curve, Maggie suddenly spots something in the road ahead, metal objects scattered across her lane that glint in the sunlight. Her training kicks in immediately. She recognizes homemade tire spikes, calps the same crude but effective devices she'd seen in conflict zones overseas with split-second decision. Making hone from years of defensive driving, she manages to swerve but not completely avoid them. A warning alarm sounds in her cab as the tire pressure monitoring system registers punctures in 2 of her 18 tires. The reinforced design prevents immediate deflation, but she knows she can't continue at highway speeds. Maggie carefully steers onto a wide shoulder and brings her massive vehicle to a controlled stop. She reaches for her cell phone, but as expected in these mountains, there's no signal. Her satellite phone is showing a weak connection, possibly due to surrounding peaks blocking clear line of sight. Before she can fully assess the damage, the 2 motorcycles appear from a side road ahead, followed by a pickup truck. They park, blocking the road in front of her. Drake and 3 other Warlords members approach. Her truck, their body language communicating clear intimidation. Maggie reaches under her seat, retrieving a metal baseball bat, a trucker's insurance policy. Before stepping down from the cab, she stands tall beside her, truck bat resting casually against her shoulder. Having some trouble, Drake calls out, feigning concern. Roads around here can be hazardous. Good thing we were in the area to help. Funny coincidence. Maggie responds, her voice steady. I don't recall requesting roadside assistance. Drake's smile doesn't reach his eyes. Think of it as a community service, of course, maintaining these roads, keeping them safe for truckers like yourself. That takes resources. I'm sure the county appreciates your civic engagement, Maggie says. DRYY when the biker's a heavy-set man with a shaved head that Drake calls Bull steps closer, examining her damaged tire. Looks like you'll need some help changing this big job for a woman alone. Maggie doesn't move. I've changed more tires than you've had hot dinners. Friend, maybe Drake interjects, but there's a matter of time. Delay like this could make you miss your delivery window. We could have you back on the road in 30 minutes for the right consideration. Call it $1,000 special first-time customer rate. Or another biker adds, a lanky man with prison tattoos on his neck. We could call our buddy at County Dispatch report an unsafe commercial vehicle. That'd be at least a 4-hour wait for inspection. Maggie's mind races, calculating options. She's handled difficult situations before, but these men have her outnumbered in a remote location. This isn't about pride, it's about survival and smart decision-making. I need to check something, she says, turning toward her cab. Don't try anything stupid, Drake warns. Inside the cab, Maggie reaches for her glove compartment, removing a worn business card. It's not Walter's card she received earlier, but something she's carried for years. She pulls out her satellite phone, which now has a weak but usable signal, and dials the number on the card. The bikers watch wearily from outside. Bull makes a crude comment to the companions, drawing laughter. Drake maintains his cold stare, hand resting near his belt where Maggie suspects he carries a weapon. The call connects. After 3 rings, Gator's auto shop. A gruff male voice answers. Frank. Maggie says it's Maggie Donovan from Fort Carson. A pause and recognition. Mag's been 4 years since that trucker convention in Dallas. Need to cash in that favor, Gator. Maggie says, keeping her voice calm despite the tension. I'm on Pine Ridge Highway about 20 miles east of Riverdale. Got some tire trouble and unwelcome company. The Warlords MC. Another pause. Longer this time when Frank speaks again, his voice has hardened. They Hurt you not yet, just try and shake me down. How many 5 that I can see stay put don't escalate. Unless you have time, about 40 minutes out with some friends. Copy that. Maggie says, using the military acknowledgement reflexively. And Mags, these boys picked the wrong trucker to mess with telling. And preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoyed, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The call ends. And Maggie returns the phone to her pocket. She takes a deep breath, then steps back down from the cab, still holding the bat. Casually, Drake approaches his patients, visibly wearing thin, making arrangements to pay us what we're owed. Just let him my delivery point know. I'll be delayed. Maggie says, had to arrange for a replacement driver. Take over. Drake frowns, not expecting this replacement. Medical supplies don't wait. Maggie explains calmly, I may be stuck here, but the delivery will still happen on time. This clearly wasn't in Drake's plan. He'd expected to delay her enough that she'd pay his extortion to meet her deadline. He recovers quickly, though his smile returning cold and thin still leaves you with a problem. Doesn't it? Damaged truck, middle of nowhere tow truck from the nearest town, will cost you more than we're asking, not to mention our inconvenience fee has just gone up. Bull steps closer, towering over Maggie. 2,000 now, lady payment for wasting our time. Maggie adjusts her grip on the bat. Slightly tell you what I've got, about $40 in my wallet. It's yours if you and your friends leave now. A moment of stunned silence. Then Bull laughs. You hear that. Drake, ladies got jokes. Drake doesn't laugh. His eyes narrow as he studies Maggie more carefully, reassessing. You're not afraid of us. Most people are. I've seen scarier things than men on motorcycles. Maggie says simply. Something in her tone gives Drake pause. He takes a step back, signaling Bull to do the same. You called someone who was a friend. Maggie says, sheriff's in our pocket. Drake warns, didn't call the sheriff. Drake exchanges glances with his companions, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face for the first time. Check her ID. He orders Bull, let's find out who we're dealing with. You on my license? Maggie asks. It's in my wallet in my back pocket. I'm going to reach for it. Slowly, Bull watches her movements with suspicion as she retrieves her wallet and hands over her commercial driver's license. He squints at it, then passes it to Drake. Margaret Donovan. Drake reads, Colorado license, long way from home. Home is wherever I park. Maggie replied. Drake hands the license back, his expression calculating. We can wait. Whoever you call, they're not coming faster than local deputies responding to an assault call. What assault? Maggie asks. Drake grins maliciously. The one where you attacked Bull with that bat as word against yours. 5 witnesses against 1. Maggie considers her options. She could probably take down one of them with the bat before the other overwhelmed her. She's received combat training, but that was years ago, and these are 5 younger men. Fighting isn't the answer here. 40 minutes. She says instead, that's how long you have to leave before things get complicated for you. Maybe. Drake sneers. For all of us. Maggie counters, my friend isn't coming alone. This gives Drake another moment's pause. He turns to consult with his companions in low voices. Maggie can't hear what they're saying, but their body language suggests disagreement. Drake seems to be overruling objections. He turns back to Maggie. Here's how this plays out. You give us what's in your wallet now as a down payment. We'll escort you to the nearest ATM for the rest. Then we all part ways. No harm done. Maggie shakes her head. Not happening. Drake's facade of civility drops entirely. You don't seem to understand the situation. There's nobody out here but us. No witnesses, no law, just you against the Warlords, as if emphasize his point. The tattooed biker pulls out a hunting knife, letting the blade catch the fading sunlight. Last chance to be reasonable. Drake says. Maggie's expression doesn't change, but she shifts her stance slightly, preparing for trouble. I've made my choice. The standoff stretches tension, Bill booing like a thunderstorm. Just as Bull takes a threatening step forward, the distant sound of motorcycle engines breaks the silence, not coming from the direction of Riverdale, but from the opposite way toward Wellington. Drake turns toward the sound, frowning. Ray, Victor, check it out. 2 of the bikers mount their motorcycles and ride ahead around the bend. The remaining 3, Drake, Bull, and the tattooed man, maintain their positions around Maggie. Less than a minute later, the roar of returning motorcycles is accompanied by something else, the rumble of many more engines. Ray comes racing back, his face pale. Drake, we got company. Lots of it. Drake's expression darkens. How many? At least 20 bikes coming this way. Silver Eagles patches the name. Clearly means something to Drake. His face shows a mixture of anger and concern. That's impossible. The Eagle don't ride in this territory. They do today, says Maggie. Quietly around the bend, motorcycles appear 2 by 2, filling the highway. Leading them is a massive man on a customized silver Harley. Frank Gator Davis is in his early 60s with a thick white beard and broad shoulders that haven't diminished with age. His vest bears a patch showing a silver eagle with outstretched wings. Behind him ride men and women of eous ages, all wearing similar vests. They form a semicircle blocking the road. Completely, Frank dismounts and walks toward Maggie, and the Warlords' movements deliberate and unhurried. Maggie, he nods in greeting, as if they're meeting for coffee instead of a roadside confrontation. These boys giving you trouble? Nothing. I can't handle Gator, she replies with a hint of smile, but I appreciate the company. Frank turns his attention to Drake. P. Patterin didn't expect to find you playing highway. Robert Drake's surprise is evident. You know me, I know all about the Warlords' recent activities, Frank says, his voice carrying easily despite its low-volume extortion and intimidation. Gives all MCs a bad name. This isn't your territory, Davis, Drake counters, though his earlier confidence has clearly diminished. Riverdale is our town. Highways don't belong to anyone, Frank replies. And Maggie here is under Silver Eagle protection. Bull steps forward aggressively. There's 5 of us, and only one of you stops mid-sentence finally. Noticing the overwhelming number of bikers who have dismounted and now stand in a wide circle around them, you're saying, Frank asks mildly. Drake, recognizing the untenable position, raises his hands in a pleading gesture. Seems there's been a misunderstanding. We were just offering the lady assistance with her tire trouble. After causing it, Maggie adds. Frank's eyes narrow. That right? Drake doesn't answer. Directly, we'll be on our way. No harm done. Not quite yet, Frank says. He turns to a woman in a Silver Eagle's vest who's approaching the group. Elaine, would you mind taking a look at Maggie's truck? You've got the best eye for tire damage. Elaine, a trim woman in her 50s with short gray hair and the competent air of someone who knows her way around vehicles, nods and heads toward Maggie's rig. Frank turns back to Drake. While we're waiting, let's have a chat about how things are going to work from now on. Drake's face flushes with anger, but surrounded by Silver Eagles members, he has little choice. I'm listening first, Frank says, counting on his fingers. You're going to compensate Maggie for the damage to her tires. Second, the Warlords are done shaking down truckers and businesses. Third, you personally are going to make sure word gets around that Pin Ridge Highway is now under Silver Eagle watch. You can't just move in on our territory. Drake protests. We're not moving, and Frank clarifies, we're establishing that Revi and legitimate businesses aren't anyone's territory for extortion. The Silver Eagle will be making regular rides through here to make sure that message sticks. Elaine returns from inspecting the truck. 2 tires with punctures, both reparable. We can fix them here with the supplies we brought. Be done in 30 minutes. Frank nods.